My case study presentation 2 will be done on the country of Israel. The current events that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation is the Israel downing the Syrian fighter jet over Golan Heights, Palestinians that is going to lead UN's biggest bloc of developing countries, and Israel's new self-determination law. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the Syrian fighter jet that was downed over Golan Heights. This graphic shows where Golan Heights is compared to Israel and Syria. But if we want to understand why the fighter jet was downed in the first place, we got to look into the history between Israel and some of its surrounding Arab countries. So the problem between Israel and some of its surrounding Arab countries began when European Jews that were escaping prosecution migrated to this mostly Muslim region and pretty much claimed Israel for themselves. In 1917, the British government stated its support for a Jewish homeland in what was then known as Palestine. And then in 1936, the Palestinians revolted against the British government in protest of Jewish immigration to the region. And then in 1947, the UN officially split Western Palestine into two, one side for the Jews and the other for the Arabs. So there's a lot of contention in that area and a lot of sour feelings towards each other. The Jews are, are mad at the Arabs because they feel like they are disputing what they believe their rightful claim to their land, to have a sovereign state to themselves. And then the Arabs are mad because they feel like the Jews took this land from them, and they don't believe that it was their right to take the land from them. So over the graphic over here shows the how the land was distributed before the 1967 war and after the 1967 war. Yeah, and then over here you can see Golan Heights, which is where the jet was downed, and you can see where it's at relative to Egypt and Jordan, and on a larger scale. So Israel shot down a Syrian fighter jet on Tuesday, July 24th, after it penetrated into Israeli-controlled airspace over in Golan Heights. According to the Israeli military, tensions were already high because the Syrian forces were conducting operations to take back areas on the frontier with Israel that were being held by rebels. So tensions were already high over on Israel's side. Israel fired 2 Patriot missiles at a Syrian warfighter that had penetrated 1.2 miles into Israeli-controlled airspace. So it's worth noting that 1.2 miles, when you're flying a fighter jet, really is it only takes a few seconds to go a mile. So it's currently under speculation if the pilot even knew that he was going into Israeli airspace. However, Israeli military officials do say that they issued plentiful warnings to Syria, saying that they were getting too close, saying that they were going to act or retaliate with violence if they did cross into their territory. So there's just speculation on whether it was intentional or unintentional. It's worth noting that Israel and Syria have had a truce since 1974, pledging to refrain from using military action against each other. But in this case, since Israel says that Syria had a fighter jet that went into their territory, this is technically justified. So, although the fighter jet did crash in Syrian occupied territory, Israel does say that the jet was in their territory at the time of the firing. And then on the Syrian side, they did report that the plane was downed by Israel, but they said that it was bombing rebels in southern Syria. So there's a little contradiction, a little bit of he said, she said, but That's to be expected with all of the conflict that plagues this region of the world. The next current event that I'm going to talk about is the fact that Palestine is going to lead UN's biggest bloc of developing countries. This was reported by the Palestinian ambassador Mansour. Um, this gives a political advance to the Palestinians in regard to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because the U.S. and Israel have been like with each other and have been denying that there even is an independent state of Palestine. So they're just having them in this position gives them more validation that they actually are an independent state. So it's definitely going to cause some conflict and disagreements within the United Nations from Israel and the United States, just because of the contest that Palestinian even is a independent state. The third current event that I'm going to talk about is Israel's self-determination law. This is a new law that was pushed through Parliament that officially calls Israel the nation state of the Jewish people. This is obviously going to be controversial for many people who reside in Israel who are not Jewish, because it's going to make them feel left out. A lot of the population is not Jewish, and so calling it the nation state of the Jewish people in such an official way will definitely anger quite a few people. There's also been a struggle for the past many years, trying to guarantee equal rights for the non-Jewish people and the Jewish people inside Israel, and making this um, passing this law definitely does not help further that case. Some believe that this new law goes against Israel's Declaration of Independence, because, as I stated, in their Declaration of Independence, they promised that they would treat everyone that resides in that land equally, and this new law kind of makes that much more difficult. And like with the other two events I talked about, this all goes back to the initial Arab-Israeli conflict. Without that history, none of this most likely would be happening. So if you have a good understanding on the initial Arab-Israeli conflict and why they are unhappy with each other's presence in this area, you would understand why this is such a big deal.